Everyone at that party saw what happened, but nobody, and I mean nobody, talked about what happened before it. And that's the part that changes everything. See, most people would tell you this story starts at the party, with the insult, with the crowd going quiet and everyone waiting to see what I do. But the real story, the one that explains why what I said hit so hard it left a grown man speechless in front of 30 people, that story starts 6 months earlier, in a hospital waiting room at 2 in the morning, alone. But we'll get there. First, let me tell you about the moment everyone's been asking me about. Picture this. It's a warm Saturday night, backyard full of people. Music, fairy lights, laughter, the smell of someone's grill still fading in the air. My wife Elena is glowing in this deep green dress, smiling that smile she saves for when she's genuinely happy. I'm standing near the bar, feeling like I always feel at her college friend gatherings, like a painting that someone hung in the wrong room. Present, just not quite fitting, and then across the yard I see him, Daniel, and Daniel sees me, and something shifts in his expression, something small, something that only I catch, because I've been watching men like Daniel my entire life. He starts walking over. Now, before I tell you what he said, I need you to understand something about Daniel. Because if you don't understand Daniel, you won't understand why what happened next stunned every single person in that yard, including my wife. Daniel was not just some guy at a party. Daniel was the guy, the one every group has, the one who takes up more space than he's been given. Tall, dressed like a catalog, that voice that carries 3 conversations away. He'd been part of Elena's college circle long before I ever came into the picture. And from the very first time I met him, 3 years ago at a dinner party, he'd looked at me with this very specific kind of smile. The kind of smile that says, I have already decided what you are, and what you are is not much. Little comments over the years, small things, the kind of things you can't really call out without sounding sensitive. Oh, you're so quiet, man. Elena, does he ever talk? Said with a laugh. Always with a laugh. So it's just a joke. So you can't be upset about it. Classic. Elena always brushed it off. That's just how Daniel is. He doesn't mean anything by it. And I let it go. Every time. Because I'd made a choice early in our marriage that I wasn't going to be the guy who made his wife manage conflict between her friends and her husband. But here's what nobody knew. Here's the part that makes everything else make sense. 6 months before that party, I got a phone call at 11 at night. It was from my business partner, James, and the news he delivered in the next 4 minutes dismantled everything I'd spent 7 years building. I'm not going to get into every detail right now, but what I will tell you is that by 2 in the morning, I was sitting alone in a hospital waiting room because the stress had done something to my chest that scared me enough to drive myself to the ER, while Elena slept because I didn't want to frighten her. I sat in that cold white room by myself for 3 hours, and I did something I hadn't done in a very long time. I thought, really thought, about who I was, about what actually mattered, about the version of myself I'd been performing for the comfort of other people and what it had cost me. I walked out of that hospital at 5 in the morning with a cleaner bill of health than I deserved and something else, a clarity. The kind of clarity that only comes from sitting in a room where you genuinely think something might be seriously wrong with you, and you realize you have absolutely nothing to prove to anyone. I never told Elena about that night, not the full version, and that secret is important. Keep it in your mind because it comes back at the end. Okay? Back to the party. Daniel walks over, big smile, hand shakes for the guys around me. Then he gets to me and does that nod. You know the one. We exchange a few words. He launches into his usual performance. The new car. The investment he just closed. Some girl he met in Milan. The guys around him are doing what guys do when they're around a Daniel. Nodding. Laughing. Feeding the energy. I stayed quiet. Watched. Sipped my drink. And then Elena floated over, laughing, happy, and she slipped her arm through mine the way she does, and looked up at Daniel and said, You two been getting along? Daniel looked at me, let the pause breathe just long enough to be intentional. Then, with that grin that had never once faltered in 3 years, he said, Honestly, I keep trying to figure out what a woman like you sees in a guy who never actually says anything, like, what's the appeal? Is it mysterious, or is it just nothing going on in there? A couple of people laughed. Uncomfortable laughs. The kind that happen when someone says something that crosses a line, but nobody wants to be the one to acknowledge the line was crossed. Elena's arm tightened around mine. And here's the moment. Here's what I need you to understand. There was a version of me, the version from before that hospital waiting room, who would have smiled, who would have made it small, who would have let Daniel keep the story he'd written about me because it just wasn't worth the energy. And Daniel knew that version of me. He was counting on it. That's why he said it. In public, in front of Elena, in front of everyone. He thought he already knew how this scene ended. He was wrong. I turned to Elena first. Not to Daniel. To Elena, and I gently placed my hand over hers and gave her the smallest, quietest nod. The kind between two people who have their own language. I've got this. Then I turned to Daniel. And I smiled. Slowly. The kind of smile that makes people nervous because there's absolutely nothing nervous behind it. You know what I've noticed about you, Daniel, I said, completely calm. Not just tonight, but every time we're in the same room. You need people to be watching you. You walk in, and you need the heads to turn, and the laughs to land, and the room to arrange itself around you. I tilted my head just slightly. And I used to wonder why, because from the outside, man, you have everything that should make someone feel secure. I let that sit for exactly 1 second, but a secure man doesn't need to take a shot at the quiet guy across the bar just to feel tall. He just already feels tall. The yard didn't go quiet. The music was still playing somewhere. Someone across the party was still laughing about something. But in our circle, in that little bubble of space around us, the air turned to glass. Daniel stared at me, and I watched, in real time, something I had never seen in 3 years of knowing this man. I watched him not know what to do. The grin flickered. The eyes did that thing eyes do when the brain is searching desperately for a foothold and finding none. He opened his mouth, and for the first time in probably years, Daniel had no performance to reach for. Because the thing about what I'd said was, it wasn't an attack. It wasn't mean. It was just true, said quietly, said without a single tremor of anger. And the truth, delivered that cleanly, has nowhere to bounce off to. It just lands and stays. He laughed eventually. That loud, forced laugh. All right, man. Shook his head like it was nothing, turned to the person next to him, and pivoted the conversation with all the smoothness of a man who has been managing his own exits for his entire life, and he spent the rest of the night on the other side of the yard. The guys in that circle responded in the way men respond when they've witnessed something they respect but don't have words for. Quiet nods. One of them, a guy named Rohan, who I'd met twice in my life, found me later by the drinks table and said just 4 words. That was well done, and walked away. But none of that was the moment that stayed with me. The moment that stayed with me was Elena. Because she didn't say anything right after it happened. She just looked at me, and it was the kind of look that you spend years hoping someone gives you, and when they finally do, you almost don't know what to do with it. Like she was recalibrating something. Like pieces of a picture that had always been slightly blurry had just sharpened into focus. She took my hand. Didn't let go for the rest of the night. Around midnight, the party had softened. Most of the big energy had wound down, and we'd found ourselves at a quiet table near the back of the yard. Just the two of us, her shoes off, a candle burning between us. The kind of easy silence that only exists between people who have been through real things together. She was looking at me with something in her eyes I couldn't quite name. There's something I never told you, she said. I looked at her. When we first started dating, she said slowly, my mother asked me what I liked about you, and I said you were calm. And she said, there's a difference between calm and deep. Make sure you know which one he is. She paused. I always knew. But tonight was the first time I could have shown her. I looked at her for a long moment. And something shifted in my chest, because here's the thing. Here's the part I have to tell you now. I reached across the table and took her hand, and I told her about the phone call, about the drive to the hospital, about sitting alone in that waiting room at 2 in the morning. about everything I'd never said out loud because I hadn't wanted to worry her or seem weak or add weight to her world. And as I talked, I watched her eyes fill up slowly, quietly, the way a glass fills with water. Not overflowing, just full. When I finished, she didn't say anything for a long time. She just held my hand with both of hers, the candle between us burning low, the last few voices of the party fading somewhere behind us. Then she said very softly, "Why didn't you call me?" "You were sleeping," I said, "and I didn't want you to be scared." She looked at me for a long time. Then she shook her head slowly, not in frustration, in something closer to wonder. "You sat in that room alone," she whispered, "carrying all of that, and you came home and said nothing, and then you got up the next morning and made me coffee." "The coffee wasn't that good," I said. She laughed, that real laugh, the one that scrunches her nose, the one I would burn every version of myself down and rebuild just to hear. And then the laugh softened into something quieter, and she leaned across the table and put her forehead against mine, right there, at that little candlelit table, with the fairy lights fading and the party dying down around us. "I see you," she whispered. "I see all of it. I always have. And here's what I want to leave you with. Because this story isn't really about Daniel. Daniel is barely a footnote. This story is about what happens when you stop hiding the weight you carry and just let someone who loves you actually hold it with you. The most powerful thing I did that night wasn't what I said to Daniel in front of 30 people. It was what I said to Elena at a quiet table when there was nobody watching. Because strength isn't just knowing when to speak up for yourself in a crowd. It's knowing when to finally let down your guard in front of the one person who was never going to use it against you. I spent years being the quiet one, the calm one, the one who handles everything alone and asks for nothing. And on an ordinary Saturday night, at a party I hadn't even wanted to go to, I finally understood that being truly known by someone, letting them all the way in, is not weakness. It's the bravest thing there is. So if you're carrying something right now, something heavy, something you've been sitting with alone because you don't want to be a burden or seem like you can't handle it, tell someone, tell the right person, not because it'll fix everything, but because you were never supposed to carry it alone, and somewhere in your life there is someone who has been waiting, without even realizing they were waiting, to finally say to you, "I see you, all of you," and that's enough. That's more than enough.